we started getting a real following there. And they had a logo up on the side of the building, King Eddie, home of country rock. And we were the home of country rock. And we had excellent music. We had guys there that were fantastic. When you asked them to play a certain song, they knew it and everything else. They had usually a six-night gig. They didn't have to go change their gigs every night, go here, go there. Plus, they were treated really well, and they developed a following amongst the patrons. So we did okay with the bands, and things were really good. As far as the blues coming in, we booked in one blues band just as an experiment, and they came in, and the blues name was Vassar Clements, and he came in, and I think it was Vassar Clements and the Legendary Blues Band, and they had a lot of great musicians with them. So we did that as an experiment to see what would happen. This was long before blues came to the King Eddie. And as I understand it, the new owner, Jack Karp, had to be really talked into taking the blues because he wasn't that sure of how it would work out. And actually it turned out to be a gold mine for him. The funny thing was is he went and redecorated the place, repainted it, redid this, redid that. Blues places are such that you want good food, good low prices in drinks, and a clean place. And the way it looks, as long as it's safe and everybody's happy, that's all they care about. So Jack Karp booked it in. He would charge a cover charge, and he did quite well. I worked with him for a short period of time, and I was happy that he did so well. And it's just that by the time they'd sold, Morris was manager of the King Eddie, which was more to his liking, or more, manager of the St. Louis, more to his liking. Jack got out of the business altogether, and whatever. So that was the way it went. But
can you remember any experiences of any particular bands?
So we had this rock and roll. Bands were extremely popular. We got lots of people in there. I remember a girl with the Calgary Philharmonic coming in there, and she said to me, "Boy, you must really know music well to be able to book all these great bands." I says, "I have a good ear for music." I says, "I know what I like and I know what we want," and but that was it. But she says, "Oh, I'm having such a great time." So that was what I used as a common denominator for judging it. I just asked the patrons, what do you think of the band and how do you like it there? And they would tell you, well, I want that band coming back, and they are really good and whatever. And so we had a lot of good times there, and we basically let the place run by itself. There was no fighting, and if you got caught fighting, I barred you out for the rest of your life, because I just didn't need that type of stuff there. We had bikers in there as well. They were good patrons. They didn't cause any problems. They sat at the back. They bought a lot of beer. I'd send a girl down there to look after them. I didn't go down there and talk to them too much. I wasn't too interested in what they did or whatever. I just let it roll. But we just went after the business, and that was it. And it was a live and let live place. Cops would come in, police would come in, and they were happy as long as there was no problems and whatever. If I got people starting to lean on me, they wanted to push drugs in there, I called up the narcs, and they'd clean it up in 2 days or so. So they made a lot of money. It was a good place. People could come down. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, we had lineups right outside the door and whatever. And we basically treated everybody pretty well. Some of the celebrities who came to the King Eddie were Lee Van Cleef, who starred in the movie The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, plus for a few dollars more. comes into the washroom. He's parade marshal for Midas Muffler. The parade ends up right outside the King Eddie. He comes in there, goes into the washroom, and I'm in there. I looked at him and I says, "You're a long way from the good, the bad, and the ugly." He says, "You remember me from that, eh?" I says, "I sure do." So we would treat these celebrities quite well. We had good staff there, good service, and it was basically a bar that you wanted to be in. And we were once told that Billboard magazine rated us as one of the top 10 bars in North America. Now, I have no confirmation of that, but the point was, is in our own mind, we knew we were one of the top bars. And I never had anybody complain about they were mistreated. Some people didn't like maybe the way we ran things, but we treated people pretty good, and they knew the rules there. And if a girl came in, nobody's going to break glasses and disfigure her in a fight or something like that. So we would get a lot of young girls coming in there, and once they came in, the guys would come in, and it was sort of like a place to be. It had the atmosphere, and we sort of ran it that way. But the King Eddie was not a hard bar to run, and I stayed on premise. I had a room, and I did the maintenance there, so if they had a problem, I could fix it, or if I couldn't, I'd get a plumber or electrician down there. And I remember they were complaining about our beer being too warm, so I brought in an electrician, and I phoned up, I think it was Kelsey Refrigeration. I brought in this electrician. I said, "Send me in that guy with the big muscles, the whole thing." So they sent him in. I says, "What's wrong?" I says, "We can't get these compressors working properly." He says, "You got 2-phase coming in." He says, "You need 3-phase." I says, "How much would that cost?" He says, "Oh, about $1,500. So I told the owner, and he had a friend who was an electrician. Next week, they put in 3-phase. Our beer cooler was cold. I remember that night we sold $1,000 in off sale to bikers and everybody else, because they told us your beer is too warm. So basically it was live and let live, and we treated everybody well. The bikers would come in, they'd have their run up to outside of Edmonton, and I counted, ours was a rendezvous point. I counted one night 105 bikes outside our door. And one of the owners, I went over there, he says, "Are you having problems?" I says, "No." I says, "Why don't you come over and have a look?" He says, "I don't like those bikers." So I says, "Okay." And then I had a guy from the police department phone up, and he says, "If you have any problems, just give us a call. We'll be right in there." So I remember one guy, he was with Hell's Angels out of Oakland, California, and he decided to go drink in the lobby. We had a small lobby. I says, "Sir," I says, "you can't drink here. It's against the liquor board regulations." He says, "Mr. Manager," he says, "I make my own regulations. I drink wherever I want." I says, "Well," I says, "that's the way it is. That's the way it is." So I phoned up the police. They sent in 5 motorcycle cops, and they went in. They said to this guy, "You either get into the bar and you drink there, or you're going to spend a weekend in jail." So he went back in, and that was that. So I was there from 79 as manager to about 82, and then the National Energy Program came, and that killed our business. So the owners decided to sell, and
Can you maybe explain what that was and how it impacted the business?
the National Energy Program? National Energy Program was the desire on the part of the federal Liberals under Mr. Pierre Elliott Trudeau, which is a familiar name, I'm sure you know, to buy into the oil business. and they bought up Petro-Canada, or they owned it. I don't remember, but the oil business went to hell. Prices dropped, and I think I'm not sure the exact ramifications of how it operated, either higher royalty or whatever it was. But a lot of the oil companies were thoroughly hostile towards the federal government and whatever. So that was we got caught with the same problem. We were not able to survive without the oil people, mainly workers, people getting paid and people spending money in the city and the whole thing. So we decided that it was time to go back to the basics, do what we had to do, and we lasted for a while. Then the owners said, time to sell, so they sold out, and that was the way it went. But they offered me a job at the St. Louis, which I took, but the St. Louis and the King Eddie were different hotels. The King Eddie was meant more for younger people, ones who wanted to really get into lively dancing and have a good time and the whole thing. The St. Louis catered to an older crowd, mainly people who would come down on a Friday night and dance to real old style music.
Can you remember any other famous people that you've met over the years?
Let's see. Joe Newendike with the Flames. He would come down there. In fact, the whole Calgary Flames would come down usually on a Friday. I remember, I think it was 93. They'd long passed their heyday of 89 when they won the Stanley Cup, and they were not doing that well. But they would come down there for spare ribs that we would make up on premise. And Joe Newendike, Al Coates. There was a lot of people who came there incognito, government people who would just come in and sit down there. Ralph Klein, of course, was the most famous. And they would bring in people. I think the highlight of the St. Louis was the 1988 Olympics when I was there. I worked on the desk at the time. I had a friend, she was with IBM, and she was with the organizing committee, and this was prior to the Olympics starting. So they had a few of their meetings down at the St. Louis in the basement. They'd come in on a Friday or so, and they'd order chicken and chips, and they would sit there and discuss their agenda, what they were planning on doing, and the whole thing. So when the Olympics started, we became a center for a lot of Olympic activities.
So tell me about the racing.
Oh, the horse races? Every Friday they had horse races, and they had chicken and chips that were sold. This was our busy day, and they would have 5 or 6 people behind the bar, and a guy called George Stevenson would announce the horse races. And it would be fictitious horse races with fictitious winners and everything else, and people would sit there and they would bet money at their table, and it was a big deal. They had the East End Petroleum Club down there, which was sort of a takeoff on the big Calgary Petroleum Club. And they would come down there and play the races and everything else. So this eventually became our one big day where we make all our loot and whatever. Yeah, a lot of people came down there. But the big draw for the Louis in latter years was Ralph Klein when he was mayor of the city. And once he left and became premier, and or he didn't become premier, he went and became environment minister. And an edict went out that from the city of Calgary that the people who frequented the Louis should not go down there anymore, that they were spending too much of their time down there drinking. So that sort of affected our business. So business started to slow down. This was time of old-fashioned hotels, and I noticed that from about '81 on, things started to change. When they put the LRT through here, and they put this tunnel, this cut off the east-west traffic, so people could not easily get down here. So even the owners said that this was one of the factors that caused the business to start to drop off. But all I can say is times have changed, and you gotta roll with the punches, and things are a lot different now than they used to be, and it's a different world out there. So nowadays it's King Eddie, St. Louis. They're no longer here. Shamrock just closed last week, and Cecil's pulled down. I don't think there's one old hotel around anymore. And any place, blues music, any place can become home of the blues now. All you do is you've got to get the right bands in there, and that's important. You got to get the right bands in there, and they have to like what they have and whatever, and that's the most important thing. But I didn't really care for managing a bar. I didn't really care for it at all.
It just happened.
It just happened, and that's how a lot of things do happen, and whatever. And you know, it's just one of these things that you're there, and one day, you know, you're made manager, and the next day that's it.
Let me ask you one final question. Were you here during the last flood, or maybe early?
Yes, I was.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about your experience of the flood?
Yes, I will. The flood started on about June 20th, 2013. It came on us very quickly. I was up on the 12th floor, and I looked out the window on a Saturday morning, and I saw lots of pools of water. Came down here. One of the people took me out here. Our backyard here looked like Niagara Falls. It was just torrents of water coming through. Water was coming through all over. It went down into the city parkade, went into City Hall. They were evacuating people in boats right in front of our building, about half a block away. Cars had water right up to the windows. There was police everywhere. So we basically stayed in our room. We could not get out of the building. So nobody came around until about 2 o'clock, and they told us that we would have to evacuate the building, that they had to shut off the power in the downtown core. Anyways, we evacuated the building. I walked down from the 12th floor down to the main floor in the dark with a flashlight, tapping my way. So I got downstairs. They took us out to Southland Leisure Center. Then I went out to Olds, and I was back here on about July 17th. We were compensated quite well. Our stay with the city at Southland Leisure was really good. Unfortunately, we were all on cots, but the food was very good, and we had first-class service up in Olds. We stayed at Olds College. But our basement was flooded out. Our whole heating system went, and we have an auxiliary generator at the back of the building now, and we will be able to stay here in the building in the event of another flood. It took me a long time to get over it. Finally, I got over it, and but even now to this day, mid-June, people still get very scared when it comes to the flood. But Trinity, the people that own this building, they did a fantastic job, and the mayor also did a fantastic job, and they got us out of here, and they treated us really well. But my feelings now towards refugees, I see them in a different light because I know 100,000 people were evacuated here. And I was one of them. So I hope never to go through that again, but they'll be better prepared now, and they're spending the money, and things will be a lot different. But it was traumatic for everybody in this building, but we were treated really well. But I kept thinking of that place in the States in New York that had the flood there. They had that, not the flood, it was a tornado there, or Hurricane Sandy, and all the problems they had. The Allison Redford government was pretty good. They stepped in, they gave us a check for $1,200 when we were up in Olds. We had a lot of freebies. We didn't have to pay rent for the month of July, the whole thing. So overall, it was very, very good financially. But for all the money we got, I wouldn't go through that again. And what I would do is, in the event of a flood, I would just take a Greyhound out of here, go down and visit my mother in the Hat and stay in a motel. But I wouldn't go through this business like we had up in Southland. You're in a room with 90 people and all sorts of people and whatever. But they had no alternative. It was any port in a storm, and we had to take what we had. So that was it. The weather was beautiful. The people who lived in that area lived in homes that were worth $1 million or thereabouts. They treated us really well. The kids who lived in that area, I don't think they even knew there was a flood going on. They were just going about their life just as if nothing had happened and whatever. And it was, like it was just another day in summer. But yeah, I wouldn't want to go through the flood again. So